welcome to the first ever History with R&R Roundtable. With me will be ongoing Jeff Franklin and Mark the Inflay Tired. How are we doing?
Doing great.
Doing fine tonight.
All right, so we've been meaning to release this, but life. Anyway, so today's topic is going to be D-Day. Going to start off easy, nothing too controversial. So D-Day was basically the opening of the Second Front, other than, of course, the Africa campaign. But D-Day really marked the turning point when it really became the end, the writing on the wall for the Germans in World War II. And so first I'm going to go around the table and just kind of everybody's impressions of D-Day and what really sticks out to them, maybe, a key point to it, and then we'll get talking about it. So we'll start with Jeff.
Well, this was just a huge collaboration between the Allies to finally bring a front against the Germans to liberate France and some of the other countries that Germany had taken over and the war. And it was just a huge effort, just amazing what they did. A lot of manpower, a lot of ships brought to bear, a lot of planes. It was just an incredible, I think probably the most incredible battle that has ever taken place in warfare.
Yeah, you could definitely make that argument. Mark?
I agree with Jeff. I mean, he hit every nail on the head with that one, but also the planning that went into it, getting everybody mustered together to make this attack, and also the operations that were subterfuge to make the Germans think the Allies were going one way when they weren't. So I mean, it was a lot of heavy planning, and if it hadn't been able to be pulled off, yeah, we probably wouldn't be speaking English right now. But
yeah, well,
good
maybe
point.
there's debate on that, but it definitely would have set back the Western Front by years, not months. For me, D-Day is always this amazing collaboration between countries that even in the D-Day invasion itself, they were very, okay, this is where you're landing, this is where we're landing, and this is where you're landing. And, each landing has its own story, whether it's Sword, whether it's Omaha, whether it's Utah. They each have their own individual challenge, and they have their own individual story. And I think it is just amazing that, one, it was pulled off. Just the very fact that they got it done. And I'm really glad that they didn't rush it, because that was something that Stalin was pushing for, was that they rushed D-Day. And I'm glad they took the time, because what they had learned before, and being Canadian, I got to bring it up, and that is Dieppe. They learned that if they don't plan it right, this is going to go tits up, and it's going to go tits up fast. Mm-hmm. And so, I mean, the Royal Navy actually committed ships and not just, destroyers. The Royal Air Force was fully committed. And they also, like what you hinted at, Mark, that I think we should really talk about a little bit, is the lengths to which the Allies went to really confuse the Germans.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
definitely so.
Building a fake military and putting what was at the time one of the most highly recognizable names in charge of the fake army. You wouldn't do that these days.
Oh, no.
You'd never see somebody who's in the limelight being sent to some backwater place where there's going to be no action just for the sake of deception. which of course they did with Patton.
Mhm.
Rommel was in charge of the Western approach for the Germans. Rommel had dealings with Patton, knew who Patton was, and so it was leaked that Patton was in Calais, which is where the Germans felt that was going to be the most sensible place for the British to make the crossing, because that was where it was the shortest. It was the shortest crossing in the English Channel. So it was leaked purposely that that's where Patton was in Calais. And it added major credence to that's where the Allies are going to cross, because that's where Patton was.
And I think it's brilliant that they false flagged everything. I mean, if that hadn't worked, who knows how D-Day would have went off.
Yeah, and not only that, but just then once you do get D-Day taking place, even though it was a success, there were some things that did take place that even to this day they're still argued about, like whether the bombers actually hit targets. The Air Force will tell you they hit everything that they were targeted to hit, and the ground troops will tell you they missed everything except for the French fields. Which is kind of, looking back, hindsight 2020, it's a comical thought. The Air Force tells you that, no, we hit everything we were supposed to, and the ground troops will tell you, yeah, they hit a whole bunch of French fields behind the battlements, especially on the American side.
And it was somewhere in between, I'm sure.
Yes. The truth is somewhere in between that, but yes.
Yeah. And to stay corrected, it wasn't false flagging; it's putting false flag officers in positions, or putting them falsely in position. I apologize.
Deception.
Yes, I apologize for using that term incorrectly.
Yeah, and
they had false communications to.
Oh yes, they also did. One of the other things that they did was that they sent bombers over the English Channel, and the bombers dropped aluminum foil.
Was it aluminum foil or copper?
It was aluminum foil.
Mm-hmm.
I'm pretty sure it was aluminum foil. They dropped them from the planes to give a false radar signal up by Calais as the main Normandy invasion is taking place, so that it would confuse the Germans, making them think that the Normandy was a distraction from Calais, that Calais was the true target. The other thing that helped the Allies, which was completely out of the Allies' control, was actually the Germans' own hierarchy. The tanks, so the panzer units that are around the Normandy landings, are not allowed to move without direct approval from we'll call him Dalfi. That's my favorite word, Dalfi. YouTube doesn't know what that means. Without his authorization, the tanks can't move. And that drastically helps the Allies, because the panzer units are frozen, which allows them to get the beachhead.
Well, was Rommel at the front, or did they have to?
Rommel was at the front. The problem was Rommel had gone home.
Okay.
For his wedding anniversary, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
So he was not at the front during that time. If Rommel had been at the front and not at home, Rommel was the kind of commander that would not have waited for Dalfi's approval. He would have just sent the tanks in and went, meh, what's he going to do? Fire me?
Now, I wonder if the Allies realized that he wasn't there.
There's conflicting reports about that. There are conflicting reports. Some say, yes, of course, it was all part of the plan, but that's, hindsight's 2020, and I don't know if I completely believe that. I think it was a lucky strike.
Question:
Um,
Had they captured an Enigma machine at this point, or was that
yes.
later on?
Yeah.
Okay, is that how
Yeah, they had.
is that is how? And pardon me, because most of mine is the Pacific theater more than is the Atlantic. But was that how they were getting false communications in, or just was it leaked on purpose to get
Some of
radio?
that and some of it was just leaked because a lot of it was it wouldn't be the Enigma machine because the Enigma machine would let them know what's where, like the German movements,
Mm-hmm.
but to trick the Germans, they wouldn't use the Enigma because they needed to make sure the Germans didn't think they had the Enigma machine. Which is a whole nother topic we could get into, the moral standpoint where there were lives lost because they knew it was going to happen, but they couldn't intervene because there was nothing that they could say that would be a cover, right? So
Right.
when they used the Enigma information, there had to be a cover reason. So there had to be a cover story. So the reason the British found this out is a rogue plane happened to fly by, right? But they needed that to be somewhat credible.
Mm-hmm.
If not, they couldn't use the Enigma information. Otherwise, it's going to be found out if every little thing you do is met with "we were ready for you." Right?
Right.
So there was a lot of times during World War II that men and women died and they knew it was going to happen. And it was let to happen.
Yeah, they couldn't reveal that they had the Enigma.
Yeah. So and that'll be actually a really interesting topic because nowadays it's looked back upon as a bad thing. A lot of people are, how dare they do that? And it's like, you just don't understand. You give up you're at a poker table and you're just playing with your hand so that everybody at the table can see at that point. If you did it that way, but I digress.
Mm-hmm.
And more lives could have been lost, but that's
Yes.
another story.
Yeah, but back to D-Day. So the combined Allied attack goes off pretty well on the Canadian beaches. The British beaches are relatively taken pretty easily. The two that are the major where everything almost fell apart was on the American beaches. And to this day, it is contested why. Some of it was the very nature of the water at the time. It wasn't as calm as it was for the Canadians and the British. The other thing was the American tanks sunk. The Canadians and the British were able to get a lot of their armor ashore, whereas the Americans weren't. The water was too rough, and a lot of the American armor that was to make it to the shore ended up at the bottom of the lake, the ocean, and never saw combat. So it was a much harder road to hoe, as they say, for the Americans. The other thing was, in retrospect, they look at it as the bombing raids might have been a little bit more precise as opposed to on the American side. But the major one was the armor. The Canadians and the British were able to get their armor ashore, and the Americans struggled in that department, which meant that they had to take pillboxes and machine gun nests with very little protection, and also just the way that the beaches were designed for killing. It was a killing field, is what it was designed for. Rommel had done his job well. And it is amazing to this day that it didn't fall apart. It is actually amazing. You just sit there and you just look at everything that could have gone wrong and everything they needed to go right for this to actually be pulled off is absolutely unheard of. So I think what we'll do is we'll give closing thoughts and then we'll wrap this one up. So Jeff, take her away.
Well, this was just a pivotal point in the war. Amazing collaboration between the different countries involved with the Allies. They had a lot of luck in this. They had the weather on their side. They had the moon phase. They planned all this in advance. They picked the dates that they were going to go in based upon the moon phase. They needed bright moonlight to aid them. They had paratroopers go in ahead of time to get inland and help with the struggle, with the fighting. And it was just amazing that they could pull all this off, and they did. And their projections for casualties were higher than they actually were. So again, just amazing. A lot of luck on their side, and then eventually this led to Paris being freed, and the other countries involved that were taken over by the Germans, they were freed, and eventually leads to the end of the war. So just amazing, pivotal point in history.
Absolutely. And Mark?
I can't say it better than Jeff did, but it's the group effort between the Allies. I mean, you have the British, the Americans, the Russians, and the Canadians. I'm not going to leave the Canadians out, Robert. But pulling together.
Can't leave them out.
Yeah, you can't leave them out. But pulling together to pull off something amazing that probably could never be done again. And well, it couldn't be done again because warfare has changed, but couldn't be done again in this lifetime the way it was pulled off. And like you said, the amount of casualties that that were projected, and they were lower than that, is just completely amazing. And the fact that the Americans set back the way they were, have to go from nest to nest, taking out different targets, and the reinforcements with the British and the Canadians coming around to help was also a great help. I mean, without this, like I said earlier, will we all be speaking English right now, or will we be in this position to talk?
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to thank everyone. I want to thank my panel, Jeff and Mark. This will be a ongoing thing. Every Friday, we're going to sit down and pick a topic of history and kind of have a little chit chat. It's not going to be too information heavy, but I think it'll be a nice way to just kind of discuss something that's happened in history, get 3 different viewpoints on it, and I hope you've all enjoyed. And as is tradition on this channel, I just want to say please like, share, subscribe, check out the store, check out the links in the description. And until next time, thank you and good night.